This is the southwest of France, more precisely the area around the village of Montignac, home to the Lascaux Cave. In front of us stretched the landscapes of Périgord, hills, pine forests, groves of holm oaks, and a few villages with neatly aligned houses, dominated by chateaux and manor houses in the characteristic local stone. At the bottom of the valley runs the Vézère River, sometimes calm, sometimes swollen by the rains that furrow the limestone slopes of Périgord Noir. For thousands of years, the water hollowed and carved out the landscape. Its tumultuous strength gave rise to the cliffs and rock shelters in which the first men settled. Long after the water had gone, our ancestors travelled up the dry beds of these underground rivers and also left their mark, the signs of their passing. Some of their frescoes, probably the most beautiful, would be revealed 18,000 years after being painted. This fabulous discovery was made, as so often is the case, by chance.
Marcel Ravida and his friends were out on Lascaux Hill with their dogs. In the late afternoon, they decided to go down to Montignac, passing through Lascaux woods. While they were in the woods, Marcel's dog ran off into the bushes and disappeared. Marcel was intrigued. He went after it, parted the branches, and saw a hole in the ground, barely a metre deep, in which the dog was furiously digging. He pulled the dog out, and in doing so, sent a stone tumbling inside the hole, making an echo.
Their imaginations fueled by adventure stories, the boys thought they'd stumbled upon an underground passage, and certainly treasure. 4 days later, on Sunday, better equipped, 3 boys accompanied Marcel Ravida to the legendary tunnel. One of them was Simon Cuenca. Here he is, 76 years after the discovery, the last surviving member of the group. September the 12th, 1940 changed his life. He still remembers the sequence of events.
The 4 of us made the hole larger, and Ravida went down first. The tunnel sloped downhill, and then we came out into the cave. We had a lantern and candles, so you can imagine the effect with the shadows and everything. When we saw it, it was amazing.
It wasn't what they'd hoped for, but it was a treasure nonetheless, and one they would now have to protect. The experts of the day, including Abbé Breuil, a prehistorian, visited Montignac. The frescoes had survived miraculously through the ages, and they couldn't risk losing them. But at the end of 1940, France was occupied, and elsewhere war was raging. To prevent people breaking in and pillaging the site, the discoverers decided to stand guard on the hillside. Then, before the end of winter, the cave was sealed shut with a metal cover. Lascaux was forgotten about for another 7 years. The Paleolithic frescoes didn't see the light again until the end of the war. In 1947, building work was carried out on the site so that everyone could admire the Cro-Magnon paintings.
They decided that this exceptional site should be open to the public so that people could learn about the mentality and artistic abilities of prehistoric man.
From then on, Montignac opened itself up to tourism with all its successes. People came from everywhere. On some summer days, more than 1,500 visitors filed past the Aurochs in the Hall of the Bulls.
The high volume of visitors that followed, which was logical given the knowledge we had at the time, didn't take into account the effect on the ecological balance of the site, on the microbiological life of the decorated walls. We were still in the mineral world. All of that would become clearer in the 60s, at the same time as the problems appeared.
The problems were initially the development of microscopic algae that spread on the walls, the green sickness, then a layer of calcite, limescale, which covered the frescoes, the white sickness. The cave was in crisis.
When the cave was closed in 1963, 64, 65, and it was discovered that the damage was irreversible, the idea of a replica was born, and Lascaux 2 opened in the early 1980s.
A site was chosen a few hundred meters from the original location, on the same hill, in the same forest. A copy of the Lascaux Cave would be created from scratch, a full-scale replica of parts of the cave system, those containing the most frescoes, a task that would occupy Monique Pétral and her team for more than 11 years.
We worked on the principle of studying as precisely as possible, as slowly as possible, so that the reproduction would be as spontaneous as possible.
They even had photographs to help them in their work. making the result all the more realistic. 30 years after it opened, the first replica, Lascaux II, still receives more than 260,000 visitors each year. Everyone descends into the Hall of the Bulls in a whirlwind of animals and colours.
It's true that from here you realise that the title of the prehistoric Sistine Chapel is well deserved.
This is the outline of the whole of the Lascaux Cave system. 240 metres of tunnels and 900 square metres of decorated and engraved walls. Lascaux II represents only a tiny part of the complex, the chamber's richest in paintings, the Hall of the Bulls and the Axial Gallery. Lascaux III gives the public the shaft scene and the main frescoes of the nave, the crossed bison, the black cow, the frieze of the stags. Different techniques were used to make these 6 emblematic frescoes on 6 mobile cave sections, and the result paved the way for an even more ambitious project.
With the emergence of new methods and new technologies, a new concept, Lascaux IV, is now underway for the conservation and study of the cave.
This is where this totally unique project will take place, involving 30 people for more than 3 years.
You don't always realise how huge it actually is.
Reproducing all of the walls, engravings and frescoes in Lascaux.
It's a phenomenal task.
And as it's never been done before, there are no points of reference.
With all the projects so far, everything's been done for the first time.
Everything will have to follow on seamlessly in order to meet the deadlines and achieve the goal. Making this complete, full-scale replica of the Lascaux Cave is a leap into the unknown. Nothing is truly defined. 3 years is the only information available. And it's the time allotted to all the participants in this technical adventure. Teams have been formed, each dedicated to the creation of a wall, a segment of the cave. Each operation has to flow perfectly into the next. Otherwise, how will they be certain to finish on time? At this stage, no one can say.
Our task is really to produce an exact replica of the cave, to enable the public to experience the same emotions they'd feel if they had the immense privilege of visiting the original Lascaux Cave.
Everyone is counting on a piece of technology to aid them in each of their tasks, a shared document born from the latest generation of topographic laser scanners, a digital clone of the cave. In short, Lascaux in 3 dimensions. It's in Isère, in the Charles-Henri cave, that we're going to meet the team that scanned the walls of Lascaux and find out how they went about their task.
These scanners have acquisition capacities of 500,000 to 1 million points per second, which allows us to recreate a 3D model of the cave.
L'ex-raillé en laser va percuter une paroi, un objet. Il va vous renvoyer une information spatiale.
The beam makes a 360-degree sweep of the wall. In addition to the volume and relief, it's the colours and mineral composition that are recorded. So that no shadows remain, the scanner is moved on its tripod to several different places. This means the smallest corner of the cave is recorded. These are 3 recordings from the same room, from 3 different places. The same markers are used for each, 3 points on the ground. By superimposing the digital readings, the total volume of the cave is obtained without any areas of shadow. Powerful computers are required to process the raw data. The form is obtained by connecting the points, 2 for a straight line, 3 for a triangle. The triangles are then assembled to create the volume. At the same time, 50,000 extremely high-definition photos have been taken. Each of them contains coordinates, which will then provide the relief for the digital skeleton of the cave. The precision is extreme, 16 pixels to the square millimetre.
Without this level of definition, we wouldn't be able to make an exact replica.
The port of La Rochelle. It's in a city known for its nautical activities that the next stage of the Lascaux adventure will take place. The engineers in this company have taken on a very unusual assignment.
We usually make boats that have smooth, fluid shapes, streamlined in fact. Here we had to do the opposite, make a totally beaten-up shape, without any particular line, but still respecting the digital data.
Here, the cave is divided into sections. In this digital model, each section has its own colour. Pieces of a puzzle carved from polystyrene blocks that will then be assembled thanks to tabs and notches. Here's the result once the puzzle is assembled in the Montignac workshops. A real piece of Lascaux. The contours of the cave wall are already clearly visible and look very realistic. Water is the sculptor of all of these landscapes. It clears a path, channels through the rock, creates the valleys. But this is only the visible part of its work, because it also moves under the surface.
The geological history is complex, with different formations across the whole landscape. Above Lascaux, we have limestone, right where the cave is, but alongside that we also have pockets of sand, pockets of clay, and so on.
It's the accumulation over millions of years of the shells of marine invertebrates, compacted by the pressure at the bottom of the oceans, which formed the limestone. Then, through random tectonic shifts, these rocks rose to the surface, dried and hardened, but also cracked. Rainwater seeped in, laden with CO2 from the atmosphere, which acted as an acid. Water, running through increasingly large networks, ended up carving tunnels through the softest layers of limestone, forming the caves.
We know of hundreds of caves that measure a few meters, some measure a few hundred meters, and we know that there are dozens or hundreds of undiscovered tunnels beneath our feet.
So why was Lascaux chosen from amongst the multitude of caves?
It's the geology, the mineral detail, and the shape of the wall that inspired the painters.
What you see here is a perfect illustration of what the prehistoric entrance to Lascaux might have looked like. A small porch opening onto the wood, a talus cone, and then a tumble of about 20 meters down to the Hall of the Bulls. It's the same sound level, the same mineral environment, the same temperature. With these little paintings recreated here, you get an idea of the effect of the light moving on the walls. Once the river retreated millions of years later, it was visited by prehistoric man.
In this very special cave, they found dry walls covered in white calcite.
It's an ideal canvas for painting.
Here in the workshop, the first thing to reproduce from the real Lascaux is the general appearance of the walls. The polystyrene blocks are now assembled on a steel frame. All that remains now is to define the texture of the rock more clearly. This is the job of the modellers, who will work with papier-mâché.
The polystyrene already shows us all the hollows and bumps, things like that. And then we use this paste to create the whole mineral aspect of the wall.
All the details that we put in, all the smoothed, eroded granular areas, you learn little by little. There are techniques, little tricks for getting the effect.
Each modeller gives their own view, sizing up the wall in progress.
We'll look at that, and then we'll have to blend this bit in so that it goes down gradually until we reach the bottom. It's too
regular, in fact.
This discussion has one aim: to homogenise the final aspects of the work and eliminate any inconsistencies.
The goal isn't to make a patchwork, but one wall, one work, all together.
The artists are about to engage in a long and close relationship with this wall, known as the shaft scene.
What I'm tackling is a more precise area, because there's a fresco here. I put up some pictures, some photographs, which allow me to see the details, such as, for example, this little highlight, which we can see on the screen. So here I'll be able to outline it really precisely, because I know it's there.
At this stage, one of Lascaux's first secrets has already been revealed, and we can almost guess at the way Cro-Magnon man approached this work.
There's volume to a head, to a belly, to an eye, a mouth. It gives enormous character to the figures in front of us and upon which we're working.
Once the polystyrene wall has been modelled, it's time to make the impression for the moulding. The polystyrene will be coated with 3 layers of silicone rubber, each taking several hours to apply, and a few more, so that the structure can withstand the next stage. An impression of the cave has now been made on the back of this rubber skin. It has to be removed from the polystyrene. The contact surface is such that the 2 elements are extremely difficult to separate. The blocks are thrown away, they're no longer useful. After the finesse of the modelling and the precision of the brush, it's brute force that's now brought into play. How will the surface be made upon which the painters will reproduce the frescoes? Let's take a look at the different stages. Using the digital readings, the polystyrene blocks have been carved and then modelled. An impression of the wall has been made with silicone rubber. The back of this impression has been reinforced with fiberglass. The painters won't paint their frescoes onto the polystyrene, but onto a more rigid wall. It is therefore necessary to make a print of the rock, relief and shape included, and repeat the present operation the other way round. More than 900 square meters of walls will be reproduced. The whole replica will use nearly 7 tons of silicone rubber, and more than twice that weight of resin for the shell.
That's one finish, guys.
This is the next stage. The modellers apply a thin layer of stone, which will give the wall its authentic mineral appearance when it hardens. This stone coating is the artist's canvas, the blank page upon which they will first reproduce the appearance of the rock, then the frescoes. 30 years separate the making of the first replica and this one. 30 years of technological evolution, which have allowed some areas of the process to be industrialized, the main task for Jean-Baptiste.
Lascaux 2 was a cave made from a single block inside a hole, while Lascaux 4 is lots of small bits of cave that will be placed in a setting that's currently under construction.
And here it is. A stone's throw from the workshop, a massive centre dedicated to cave art is being built. There are 2 teams, 2 locations, 2 sites, which will soon have to be synchronised. One team is making the copy of the cave, the other a very unusual building. Here, the general outline of the cave is positioned at the end of the building.
The advantage of having cut the cave into lots of small segments is that we could put each of the painters in different workspaces. We'll be able to build this cave in just 3 years instead of 10.
On the site, 12 months from the official opening day, the structure, the outline of the International Cave Art Centre is beginning to take shape. The structural work is underway.
For us, the structural work represents more than 140,000 hours of labour, 12,000 cubic metres of concrete and 700 tonnes of steel.
The 100 workmen on site have only been able to keep the project on track by working in all weathers and continually rescheduling the different phases of the operation.
We've had to rethink and review a great many things that we planned. It was a challenge.
Lascaux deserved a building on par with its fame, and it was a Norwegian firm of architects who won the tender by setting the bar very high.
The architecture is really raw. There are sacred spaces with overhead light. The feeling you get from being in these spaces is really strong.
The concrete, the main component of the facades, has been treated to reflect the underground world.
We're straddling 2 worlds, raw architecture and the scenography, where you immerse yourself in the mysterious world of Lascaux.
An ambitious project, both visually and technically, a demanding proposition, Even the overall shape of the building recalls that of the hill. This is the geographical position of the Lascaux Cave. A few meters away, 150 to be precise, is the entrance to Lascaux 2, the first replica. On a broader scale, here is the location of the site that will house Lascaux 4. And finally, 800 meters away as the crow flies, at the entrance to Montignac, the Périgord facsimile workshop. This building is welcoming an exceptional group of artists, individuals capable of taking on a real professional challenge. What's about to happen here is a human adventure. As artistic director of the project, Francis Ringenbach can only count on one thing: the talent of his team.
They have sensibilities and specialities that complement one another.
30 people with very different profiles.
There are, for example, art restorers who are used to going into detail.
We've had to put some brainpower
of reproducing
to put
square
additional
millimeters
resources
or
into
centimeters
it,
of
and that
work.
was a challenge.
Each person in turn will be confronted with the major stages of making the frescoes. More than just talent, it also takes a good eye. Among the handful of people who are currently allowed to enter the Lascaux Cave is Sandrine, a technician whose help is invaluable to the artists.
The colour's really good there.
Sandrine has been roaming Lascaux for 20 years and knows it down to the last detail.
They've done a great modelling job here. It's really accurate. I must confess it's very impressive. You really feel you could scrape the clay off the benches. The finish is really amazing.
To carry out their work, the artists are relying on information from the digital clone and the photos of the cave. The two documents are combined.
The artists mainly use a video projector, which allows them to project not just an image onto the wall, but a segment of the 3D model, with its deformation, onto its initial volume.
We have to align the images with the 3D model and the layer of stone, meaning the wall. We've drawn the outlines of the figures and particular points on the wall, which have been superimposed onto the 3D model.
Two things contribute to fine-tuning this alignment: light and shadows.
After that, we can start to paint this blank canvas.
But what will the artists paint? Which version of the cave?
We can't paint it exactly as it was at the time. We're painting the effects of time too.
Even the dust has left its mark and will be reproduced on the walls. The colours used are all natural pigments, not synthetic. Ochres, oxides, as they were 18,000 years ago, in the form of powders arranged in shades, which are finally mixed on the artist's palette. And as 18,000 years ago, when it comes to applying the colour, technology takes a back seat. It's down to the human hand, nothing more. By following the outlines of their frescoes, the artists reveal the full humanity of Cro-Magnon man. But what makes this testament to the past so powerful?
Lascaux may not have revealed all its secrets.
Bull, deer, horse, line of dots, deer, horse, line of dots, bull.
This mental universe of prehistoric man, into which Lascaux invites us, shows us that humans are making their place in the world.
Going down into this cave and confronting these paintings is a unique and very personal experience.
My memory is one of beauty, one of meditation, it goes without saying too, and also a feeling of fear.
A confrontation that challenges us without us even understanding its meaning. Besides, the message of Lascaux has long been misunderstood. It was believed that Cro-Magnon man painted hunting scenes on the walls, the animals they ate. Well, we were wrong.
It can't only be that, because the most hunted animals weren't the most represented. They loved reindeer meat, and it so happens that reindeers are hardly represented on the walls at all.
No fish either, or rabbits, although they were eaten every day by the men of Lascaux. Other important elements are missing from these frescoes. No horizons, no trees, and no man either. The paintings are therefore symbolic, the frescoes naturalistic.
The animals are floating in a completely imaginary space.
And it's these animals that tell the story.
Horses, deer, aurochs and bison figure most predominantly in the Lascaux bestiary, but an ibex, felines, a bear and a rhinoceros complete the list. As in nature, the numerous herbivores occupy the wide plains. The predators are hidden. They are to be found at the bottom of the cave, lurking. And where is man in all this?
He's disguised, he's masked, he's transformed into a man-animal or animal-man. And man, in fact, when you look for him, you find him.
Is he, as they say, represented only once? In the most remote and mysterious room of the cave, the one that takes its name from its shape, the shaft, you can see him if you're willing to look for him in the features of the unicorn, one of the most emblematic figures of the Lascaux Cave. Its importance isn't due to its size, because it's much smaller than the bulls it accompanies, but what it's big in is mystery.
Its position in the cave is very important because it's the first figure we see. It's the last figure that the visitor's eye falls upon when leaving the cave.
There might be a hidden man, so you just have to hide the tip of the nostril, and maybe we can see a nose and a kind of a beard with a rather enigmatic eye.
We can also see an early example of perspective on these walls, of composition, of a layout devised for telling a story. The animals are always painted in the same order on the walls. In the background are horses overlaid with aurochs, bovines, and finally, at the front, the deer.
The figures fit together with extraordinary skill, as if these images are made to be seen together and not one after the other.
600 animals, every species, a whirlwind, which almost make us forget the dots, the lines, which are more discreet. Numerous signs, which are strange in the very least.
There are more than 400 signs. There are dots, crosses and lines for the simple signs, but there are also very complex signs, like the famous quadrangular signs.
Animals, signs, arranged like sentences on the walls.
Line of dots, horse, bull, deer, horse, line of dots, deer, horse, line of dots, bull.
No one knows what they correspond to or what they're supposed to represent.
They use this figurative and abstract material to tell a story, a myth, beliefs, etc.
Amongst all these signs, one stands out. It seems to be the signature of the painters of Lascaux, because it isn't found in any other cave of the same time.
We're looking at a work with meaning, at art, just like any contemporary art today.
Everything has to be in harmony with this art, and the construction site is no exception. Here, with the shapes, the outlines, it's a matter of creating atmospheres, spaces, to make this an unforgettable experience for the visitor.
People are in a state of contemplation. They are in the atmosphere, in the spirit, in the discovery. They are discoverers.
Here, everyone must have the feeling, like the original discoverers, that they are the first to see the mysteries of the cave. As they make their way through the building, the field of vision, space and light will gradually reduce.
We're about to enter a confined space where we are going to be a bit hemmed in because we're going down into the bowels of the earth.
The atmosphere will be reproduced. That's to say, the humidity level, the temperature.
It has to be something physical, where we're part of the experience.
This space, a kind of buffer zone, a decompression zone, lies between the replica and the contemplation room. Containing several segments of the cave, it's a place in which the visitor can look back over everything in detail and understand it.
Here you'll be able to get really close to the wall and play with the lighting to highlight the engravings.
The latest media and digital tools will of course be employed. Visitors will also be able to immerse themselves in an image cube, control 90 screens and discover the diverse nature of cave art throughout the world. Back in the workshop, and the centre is due to open in 7 months. Work has been progressing for several weeks on a very unusual chamber, an area appropriately known as the shaft.
The interesting thing about Lascaux is that there really was a master. The uniform style adds to the great reputation of the cave and its paintings.
A master, certainly, and a great knowledge of the animals that populated their environment.
The decoration of Lascaux took time and monopolized all the individuals in that society, with certainly a distribution of the task.
This is the orientation area of
finding
the building.
natural
It's made
dyes,
to look like a
choosing
horizontal
them,
fault.
grinding
You
them,
between
preparing them,
walls
heating
that are
them.
leaning in towards one another.
Once the group had chosen a cave to make its sanctuary, this collective task was carried out with everyone at their posts, working together.
Where we're going to be a bit
The
hemmed
social
in
group
because
at
we're
a
going
certain
down
moment
into the bowels
must
of
have
the
thought
earth.
about their technical needs and requirements and gone to this cave with lights, with fuel, so that they could light their lamps. The whole group was there, omnipresent, not to live in the cave, but to produce this unique work. Were there official artists in the time of Lascaux? Whatever the case, whoever painted this was adhering to rules. It was a construction destined from the outset for communication and exchange with others.
It breaks the time barrier. It breaks the boundaries, in fact, with our ancestors. We realize that they'd already developed all the basic techniques which we still use today. They already had brushes, they'd already blown paint, they had airbrushes and stencils.
This stenciling technique is used particularly and very obviously in the manes of the animals in the crossed bison fresco.
I think they might have placed reeds next to each other and blown the paint. You can see little specks of paint all around them.
The work is progressing, but for the artists, doubt is also growing. Does the copy resemble the model? Beth is one of the people supervising the painting of the walls.
Every morning I go and see each painter personally, and I see whereabouts they're at on their painting, if they have any questions. Because when you're painting one part of the cave, you become very, very encased in that one part, and you sort of tend to forget everything that's going on around.
Beth has to make sure that none of the artists is offering their own personal vision of the fresco that he or she has to reproduce.
If we put it on beforehand and varnish it, we're going to lose the powdery side.
You do realise when there's 20 painters working together that we do not see the same things. We give guidelines, but it's a very personal thing.
Giving reassurance, leading a group effort and inviting people to take a step back is a difficult task. The painters are often focused for days on end on a detail a few centimetres big on a wall. They need to be fully involved, but nothing in this work will bear their mark, their style.
The artist gives his artistic talent, but to a common work. No one will be given particular credit for this work, which is extraordinary.
We don't have anything to do with the emotion that comes out of these paintings. That's there. We just have to copy.
After several months of work, a panel of experts comes to validate the reproduction of each segment of the cave. If the result is unsatisfactory, it will have to be done again.
They're expecting something from us that they can't see themselves because they're not allowed into the cave.
That's how I see it in my mind's eye.
One element is causing some debate amongst the experts: the light.
It's a very special LED selection, which has a particularly good colour rendering in the red spectrum.
How will the frescoes be lit when the whole cave is finished? From what angle? Vital questions.
You sometimes discover certain fragments of engravings you've never seen before, because our lighting brings out something that we've never noticed.
Our final result will depend on how we enlighten it. Until we have the final lighting on our work, that is the only moment where we will know if it's right or not.
Let's go back to the construction site. A new team has just arrived. The concrete sculptors, charged with reproducing the original entrance to the cave, the ceilings and the lower parts, known as the benches. In short, everything that isn't painted.
These are on the right.
They're going to create the initial outline of the cave by putting together some metal frames, a very concrete mesh this time. A rough outline of the cave walls will be sketched out, a first draft that this sculptor will adjust section by section along the 240 meters of the cave.
It's a bit too geometric for my taste, so by using the computer, I'm trying to bring it round while remaining within the initial cage.
The 3D clone of the cave is also the reference for the sculptors.
I'm refining it, seeing roughly where I can add extra bars, which will mean I can use less mortar.
After assembling and readjusting the first outline of the cave, this steel cage is covered with a fine plastic mesh. The first layer of concrete will be applied to this mesh, which has been meticulously attached to the cage. Finally, the artist will add the special mortar to this rigid structure, which they will then sculpt in order to replicate the final appearance of the cave wall.
Right behind me is where the two walls will be installed, so the black cow part on the left and the panels of the frieze of the stags, they'll be installed on the posts you can see here.
The fiberglass shells and the frescoes created by the artists in the workshop will be positioned on the benches. They're running out of space and time. The first pieces of the puzzle will arrive in a few days.
We'll have to wind our way through the maze of constructions that are already installed to position them very, very precisely, that is to say to the nearest centimetre, in their environment and on the corresponding metallic structure.
This morning in Montignac, Sandrine Géraud-Vinsolange is meeting Muriel Mauriac, the current curator of Lascaux. They're going to the most restricted place on the hill, a wooded enclosure under constant video surveillance, the area containing the Lascaux Caves. This is a rare moment. We're outside the monumental bronze door, which has protected this jewel and its mysteries for more than 70 years.
The door isn't sealed up. It's open sparingly to a few people, to some privileged people who serve the cave, namely researchers who work through research programs to conserve and better understand the phenomena likely to alter the cave.
Is the famous Lascaux Cave in the Dordogne in danger? Black spots are spreading over the walls, a fungus that's worrying the scientists. Global warming is amongst the causes.
In 2001, an initial warning was given of a serious danger to Lascaux. White mould threatening to spread throughout the whole site. The problem was treated chemically, but today there are fears that it only made things worse. At the same time, a massive ventilation system was installed, which, it is thought, also upset the natural balance of the atmosphere in the cave.
It was the imbalance at a given moment that allowed some fungi or certain bacteria to take the edge over the others. There are certain areas of the cave where the roof is only 3 or 4 meters below ground level. Hence this great reactivity to the outside environment.
Today, a network of more than 100 sensors has been installed in the cave. Among the parameters monitored are temperature, humidity levels, and also carbon dioxide.
The first danger of CO2 is obviously for humans. Then it can be problematic for conservation if it's associated with condensation on the wall.
Carbon dioxide is capable of dissolving the limestone, and therefore the Lascaux frescoes, which has already happened naturally.
Due to the effect of moisture and heat, the works in the passageway and the nave have gradually altered and deteriorated. Today, the works are faded, or only the engravings remain.
This erosion is hard to avoid because today little is known about the microbiological functioning of these caves.
We have to remain very careful, very humble in this area, so as not to disrupt a balance that's existed for millennia, which has survived until the present day, and which, I hope, will survive for millennia after we've gone.
There have been no new outbreaks since the 90s, but there is no question of becoming complacent and releasing the cave from its quarantine. David Delarue acts as liaison between the workshop and the construction site. His task will be crucial in the coming hours because the frescoes will soon leave the place in which they were made for their final destination. This is a pivotal moment. It's the workshop that will now set the tempo and impose its schedule on all the teams on the site. The tension is palpable between the various site supervisors this morning.
It's trickier to do this in two parts because you have to match the points here. We install the first element and the second element has to join up with a point here.
Remember the assignment the workshop was given? Making a replica of Lascaux, a cave that had been segmented, cut into sections.
All these elements, of course, make up a gigantic puzzle, which at a given moment has to be removed from the workshop, transported and installed on the site.
In the darkness of the storage area, far from the frantic activity of the workshop, a wall awaits. Another panel, the unicorn, shrouded beneath a veil of mystery and plastic, will also soon be making its way to the site. The ceiling, decorated with the axial gallery, is one of the largest pieces in the cave's puzzle, nearly 10 meters in length. Bumps and knocks are, of course, to be avoided at all costs. But even more than that, twisting the structure, which would crack the walls and damage the paintings. You can see the tension on the faces of those responsible for the maneuver.
That can be pushed back. Stop, not too far.
The workshop and the construction site are barely half a mile apart as the crow flies. But in reality, it's another story. They'll have to go up the main street of Montignac, through the town centre and finally out along the road by the school, which is undergoing roadworks. A minefield of potholes and bumps that they'll have to navigate with the utmost delicacy. The passageways and frames have all been measured to within a millimetre, but will the manoeuvre go as planned?
The central upright to the left seems less important to me than the one on the right.
The one on the right is hyper important. It's a pretty large fragment because it's 8 meters long, 3 meters 50 wide, 2 meters 50 tall and 10,000 kilos in weight, a ton. We've got about 20 people working on this fragment.
No one likes to see the shell rocking and swinging around in the air. Everyone's worried that the wall will hit a metal post. But before the fresco can be placed on its stand, it has to be released from the transportation structure. While David and Jean-Baptiste are taking the time to fix the locking screws in place, the others have already decided to start moving the wall.
What are you doing? Communicate! Communicate!
The shell slides along a rail fixed to the ceiling.
Move it towards me! Come on, 50 centimeters, gently!
The wall is unbalanced, which isn't surprising. It's an irregular shape, but this fact is posing real problems. To move it into position, the team finally opts for the least risky method: ropes and brute force. And a balancing act in every sense of the term. It's no good. To gain the last few centimetres, they'll have to proceed otherwise.
That one's too far left.
It has to come forward.
They'll have to adjust some elements of the lower part of the cave, the only section they can alter, and remove some links of the iron cage. There won't be any impact on the final appearance of the replica because they've several centimetres in which to manoeuvre.
When we're putting it in place, we try to do it gently, one leg after another. If it goes down suddenly, it will damage the wall and it will have to be repaired afterwards.
No sooner has the first shell been put in place than the second one arrives. There are more than 30 segments to install, an operation that involves everyone on the site and remains very time-consuming. In the days that follow, the panels for the contemplation zone have to be lowered in from above because the door on the replica side will be blocked off to allow for the final installation of all the walls. The shells are in position above the lower parts of the cave, the benches, which will now have to be made to look like the original. This is the task of the concrete sculptors, who now join the fray for what promises to be the home straight of the construction work. There are 4 months left in which to make the replica look like the original cave. The talus cone, in other words the cave entrance, is the first sculpture that Yves Poisson will tackle.
It's the original entrance to the cave where the discoverers came in. We're putting real stones because there were real stones in the talus, which were embedded in the clay and in the earth.
This whole area was destroyed in 1947. No digital clones here. Sketches, a photograph and written testimonies are the only documents that can guide the sculptor's hand.
Can you add some more?
Possibly.
They need to be smooth. It's from data like that that we've been able to recreate it. And then we know the geological composition of this talus.
The last signs of the construction work to be removed are these lines and joins. The gaps have to be filled between the shells of the frescoes and the sculpted concrete walls, a highly technical operation.
It'll make an expansion joint because it will have a little flexibility, avoiding any cracks that might appear between these two materials, which are completely different.
That's what's happening to the shells and bases of the replica. No less than 650 feet of joints have to be filled without leaving the slightest trace.
We'll have to do a lot of work with the lighting and the raking light so as not to reveal the ghost of a joint that might otherwise be visible.
It's not just the frescoes that have made the journey from the workshop to the site. Some of the artists have come with them. In these noisy and uncomfortable conditions, they have to focus on the detailed work at hand. Unless they succeed in making the joints disappear, the whole work will be compromised and the magic of the replica destroyed. This adventure isn't just coming to an end for the artists. The rest of the site is also at the finishing stage. Final adjustments, technical tests, the scaffolding is being removed along with the dust, while the last pieces are adjusted. The space will soon be left to the visitors. Amongst the mysteries of Lascaux, there's the science and talent of the painters, who were able to draw on a protruding and uneven surface without their work being distorted, as if it had been done on a sheet of white paper.
Anamorphosis is a technique that consists of deliberately distorting the image that's being created so that it appears normal when seen from a particular point. That's what happened with the third auroch, which you can see here, the one with the slightly erased muzzle. If you look at its two front legs, that's where it's interesting. It really feels as though they're exactly the same length. which is absolutely not the case. This is the leg I was talking about earlier. It's 60 centimeters longer than the left. The artist had to distort it in this way so that the legs looked in proportion from the middle of the Hall of the Bulls.
Even more edifying, this bull with the duck's bill is simply being looked at from the wrong angle, because when viewed from the front from a slightly higher position, this is what we see. An auroch in all its splendour. And this demonstration of artistic virtuosity doesn't end here.
My own feeling is that these caves, these tunnels, these bowels of the earth were sacred. That's why they did these paintings and engravings here. And it's most certainly a cult dedicated to animals.
It's all the more sacred and all the more a sanctuary because it's a little bit hidden.
These paintings weren't meant for us. They did them for themselves, for their descendants. We're going to pass on this belief, this knowledge. Lascaux will become the memory of this society.
Today still, it's through these drawings, this message, that schoolchildren get to know our ancestors.
The famous story of the discovery of the Lascaux Cave is told, I think, in every country in the world. It's so beautiful.
It's also proof that drawing, through the ages, whatever our culture, is a faculty that everyone uses to communicate and reproduce the general forms of what surrounds us. Shells, frames, tarpaulins. Today, these are all that's left of 3 years of activity in this workshop.
I thought up this project, I grew up with this project, and today I feel, and most importantly I know, that the gamble has paid off.
I think we've done a good job. We're very proud of what the modelling team did.
Discovering the painting from this angle by making a replica is like nothing else in the world, that's clear. Even spiritually, it's an aesthetic journey.
Has man really changed much since that time? Are we not still the same man?
I think there will be many hundreds of thousands of people, and I can imagine my own colleagues, my own students, and indeed my children coming here to experience this national asset.
And here, we've really made a bridge. We've spanned these 20,000 years.
Within this cave, there's no distance between Cro-Magnon man and us. We are the same humanity. In front of these frescoes, there's no distance either between the teenager fleeing the war and the old man he has become. Simon Cuencas is the first person to enter the replica, as he entered the cave 76 years ago with his friends. Today, he is the last surviving member of the group that discovered Lascaux. The 12th of September 1940. The day of the discovery wasn't just a unique moment in his life, but an important day for all of us.